Hi, in this video I'm going to explain to you how to take the IGCSE business exam. I'll tell you how to approach the questions and give you some tips on how to take the exam like a pro. So, first of all, if you follow the IGCSE business program, you'll have to take two exams, paper 1 and paper 2. Both papers are worth 80 marks, and both papers last 90 minutes, which means that you should spend around 1 minute per mark. So, if you have a 4-mark question, you should spend around 4 minutes on it. If you have a 6-mark question, you should spend around 6 minutes on it, and so on. So that's my tip to help you manage your time. Let's review paper 1 first. In paper 1, you have 4 mini case studies. You should read these case studies very carefully. After each one of these case studies, you always have 5 questions, A, B, C, D, and E. And they are always worth the same number of marks. A and B are worth 2 marks, C is worth 4 marks, D and E are worth 6 marks. Your marks will depend on 4 possible criteria, which are knowledge and understanding, application, analysis, and evaluation. Not all of them apply to all questions. So let's see how it works. In questions A and B, the only criterion is knowledge and understanding. So, in questions A and B, you can be asked to define a concept, to identify features of a concept, or to make a calculation. So all you have to do is to show knowledge and understanding. For example, what is meant by income statement? Here, you simply have to write the definition. Your definition must show clear understanding. So you shouldn't just write, it's a financial statement. You would get only 1 mark for that. In order to get 2 marks, you must write a more elaborate definition. For example, an income statement is a financial document that records the revenue, cost, and profits for a given period of time. It shows clear understanding. Here's another example of question A or B. Identify 2 stages of the business cycle. In this case, just write words. No need to write full sentences. For example, growth and maturity. No need to explain what they mean. Here's another example. Calculate the forecast revenue. So here you have to make a calculation. You must show work and you must write the result. Now let's review question C. It's a 4-mark question. Usually you will be asked to identify and explain 2 things in the context of the business. So in this case, there would be 2 marks for knowledge and 2 marks for application. So what do we mean by application? It means that we want a reference to the business mentioned in the case study to appear in your explanation. For example, identify and explain 2 ways a pressure group might try to influence the actions of GOP. In way 1, you could write negative publicity. It's the knowledge point. But then you need to explain this idea in the context of the business. So you need a reference to the business. For example, the pressure groups could publish negative articles about the pipeline. The pipeline is the reference. It's the application point. In way 2, it's the same. For example, you can write boycott, okay, because the pressure groups can boycott this business. In explanation, you can write the pressure groups could organize customers' boycott of GOP's oil. Oil is the reference to the business because there is a reference to oil in the text. If you do this, you'll get 2 marks for knowledge and 2 marks for application. Now, let's review questions D and E, which are 6-mark questions. Usually in question D, you have 2 marks for knowledge, 2 marks for application, and 2 marks for analysis. Let's take an example. In this case, you are asked, identify and explain 2 ways in which the objectives of GOP might be different if it was in the private sector. Way 1. You could write Maximize profits. This is the knowledge point. In the explanation, you need to provide the reference to the business and an analysis. In this case, the analysis would be why the objectives would be different in the private sector instead of the public sector. For example, you could write, GOP would try to maximize profit with its pipeline. So pipeline is the reference to the business, so it's the application point. Whereas in the public sector, they would try to provide services for free or at a low price. That's the analysis point. The same goes for way 2. You could write that in the private sector, GOP would try to maximize the costs. GOP would try to minimize the costs. This is the knowledge point of its oil extraction. This is the application point. Whereas in the public sector, it would be more concerned with protecting jobs. It's the analysis point. So with question D, you have 2 marks for knowledge, 2 marks for application, and 2 marks for analysis. Now, let's take a look at question E. Question E is also a 6-mark question. For this question, you usually have 1 mark for knowledge, 1 mark for application, 2 marks for analysis, and 2 marks for evaluation. Let's look at question E of the same case study. Do you think the government should allow GOP to build the pipeline? Justify your answer. Here, you need to make at least 1 relevant point. For example, it would create jobs. That's the knowledge point. Then you need at least 1 reference to the business. It would create 2,000 jobs. In the text, it's written that it would create 2,000 jobs. So it's a reference to the business. And it's the application point. Then you need to show why it matters. It would be a great source of revenue for the local population. That's the analysis point. Now, if you want to get the evaluation point, you need to actually answer the question, do you think GOP should build the pipeline? A simple yes or no answer won't be enough. You need to show why your idea is better than the opposite idea. I suggest that you present 1 argument in favor, 1 argument against, and justify which one makes more sense. For example, although GOP may harm the environment, I believe the government should allow GOP to build its pipeline because it would create 2,000 jobs, which would be a great source of revenue for the local population. Since the potential risk for the environment can be mitigated by proper measures, the positive economic impact makes it worth taking the risk. So once again, you need to show knowledge, application, analysis, and evaluation to get 6 marks. My 3 tips for paper 1 are as follows. First, don't spend too much time on 2-mark questions. If you're stuck with a definition or a calculation, just skip it and come back to it later. You need to give yourself enough time to answer the other questions. My second tip is give clear and concise answers. When you're asked to identify something, 1 word for each identification is usually enough. No need to explain anything. My third tip is don't forget about the application point. You have to put yourself in the shoes of the business manager and give explanations in the context of the business of the case study. Okay, now let's take a look at paper 2. In paper 2, you have only 1 case study, which is much longer than the mini case studies of paper 1. And this case study is provided on a separate document called Insert. In this paper, you have 4 8-mark questions and 4 12-mark questions for a total of 80 marks. Let's review the 8-mark question first. Generally, 8-mark questions are split into 2 sections, and the students are asked to identify and explain 2 things. For each of these 2 identifications and explanations, you'll get 1 mark for knowledge, 1 mark for analysis, and 2 marks for application. There are 2 parts, so it's 8 marks in total. In the case study, we are told that Peter converts vans into motorhomes, that he's a sole trader, that he received a government grant, that he started 2 years ago, and that he needs to hire skilled workers. So that's the information that is given in the case study. So we need to use this information in order to answer the question. In the question, we are asked why the government helped Peter. We can start with an identification. For instance, to increase employment. This is the knowledge point. Okay? So Peter may have received a grant in order to increase employment. But we need to explain what it means. So in this explanation, we will need 2 application points. Okay? So we need an explanation in the context of the business. And then we need 1 analysis point. The grant helped Peter start his own business 2 years ago. Okay? So that's 1 application point. We need a second application point. Peter will employ other workers to expand his business. Okay, so we need 2 application points, and then we need 1 analysis point. So we need to explain how this would benefit the government. For example, we can say, this will reduce unemployment in the area and increase incomes. So we need to elaborate a little bit more on our first knowledge point, and this is the analysis point. Okay? In the second part of the question, we do exactly the same. We use the same combination of knowledge, application, and analysis. For example, we can say that Peter would increase economic growth because he would create incomes by converting vans. That's 1 application point. He's likely to make his business more successful by training his workers. That's a second application point because this information is in the text. And as a result, he will provide more tax revenue to the government. That's the analysis point. Now, let's review the 12-mark question. Generally, you will be asked to consider 3 things and then give a recommendation as to which one of these 3 things is the best. For example, here, you are asked to consider between 3 pricing strategies, and then you have to choose the best. So, this is the way you get marked. If you give a brief outline of the advantages or disadvantages of each method, you'll get 3 marks. If you give a more detailed discussion of the advantages and disadvantages, you get up to 6 marks. So 2 marks for each method. If you give a limited recommendation, you get 2 more marks. If you give a more detailed recommendation, you get 4 more marks. And finally, on top of that, if you give 2 references to the business, you get 2 more marks as application points. For more detailed information, do not hesitate to check www.ciebusiness.co.uk, which has helped us in the making of this video and provides great content about the IGCSE business program. I hope you enjoyed the video, and goodbye.